long does it take before they ship you off?
After I got sentenced, it was I think it was 3 weeks.
Okay.
And, they came and got me, took me to the airport, and I go to Oklahoma, and that's where they tell me that I'm going. So they said, you're going to the FMC Butner. And I said, what's that? And they said it's a medical center. And I guess that my attorney put in the paperwork that, this was really out of character for me. So he was afraid which I probably did have a little breakdown. So they wanted me to get help for depression or something. So they was going to send me to the Federal Medical Center.
Okay.
Right. And then I could go on because they wanted me to get if I was depressed or something, because, somebody who has never really been in trouble to do that, it's not like I worked my way up to bank robbery.
Yeah. You just boom.
I just jumped in head first.
So they send you to Butner first.
They send me to the Butner to the Federal Medical Center, and I'm in R&D, and a psychiatrist comes in and talks to me. 5 minutes he talks to me. He goes, "There ain't nothing wrong with you." I said, "I told you that. There's nothing wrong with me." So they have a work cadre there, right, where they basically do all the jobs in the medical center. And I mean, it's like a real nice hospital. I mean, they got a cancer floor there. They got a floor where they do all the operations like hip replacements, knee replacements. And then they got a psychiatric wing, right? And it's way down this hallway, but between these like locked doors and everything, all by itself. So I'm after I go through A&O, this guy comes to me and says, "Do you want a job as a inmate companion?" And I said, "What's that?" And he goes, "Well, you help guys who can't really help themselves, help them with their laundry, help them clean their room, make sure they're showering and stuff." And I go, "That sounds pretty good." He goes, "It's on the psych floor." And I'm like, "Okay." And he says, "And you have to be there on call, so it's basically a living." And I'm like, "Okay." He goes, "You'll like it there. The rooms are huge. It's quiet. You'll have the TV to yourself." I said, "I'll try it. Ain't no big deal." So I go up to one of the floors, and they got these elevators, right? And there's like 4 units that are nothing but psych. And I walk onto this unit, and Mike, it's like a ghost town. Nobody's out. Nobody's out. They got a guard and they got a nurse on call 24 hours a day. They do all the med line there and everything. So there's like nobody out. And if they are, they're just aimlessly walking around the unit in a circle. I mean, they're just medicated and stuff like that. So, the nurse kind of tells me, they got high functioning guys, and then they have guys who kind of need some help. So she told me, all the ones I was assigned to. So that's what I was doing. And I sent you the picture of Russell Weston.
Let me pull that up real fast.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that is Mr. Weston. Russell Weston was in for shooting a Capitol Hill guard and I don't know if it was an undercover cop or a regular cop, but he had a shootout with the Capitol Hill police.
Okay.
So, and I guess he had a lot of mental problems. Supposedly, he went there to assassinate Congressman Tom DeLay. This was back in the 90s.
Okay.
So
yes, I kind of remember that.
So he got shot up a little bit. He got shot in the leg. He got shot in the hand, the arm. So he was a little disabled, and he was in a wheelchair. So he's basically there because they're thinking that, he's got some serious issues, psychiatric problems. They said he had it all his life. And so they found him incompetent, kind of like they did John Hinckley when he tried to assassinate Reagan.
Yes.
Well, the doctor who had Hinckley, Dr. Sally Johnson, was the one who was treating Russell Weston. So they had him there, and he hadn't been to trial yet. So they're going to keep him there until they deem he's fit to stand trial. Or if not, he's just pretty much going to stay in that medical center. Now,
if he's never deemed fit to stand
competent.
trial, they are competent. They just stay there. They
Right.
have to stay there. Okay, they're like medically committed or something.
Right. So
criminals.
So he's thinking also that kind of like Hinckley, like if I do 20 years here, maybe they'll put me in an outside hospital and then I could eventually get to go home. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying that's what he's doing, but I kind of noticed with him, he was very intelligent and he didn't talk to many people, but he really talked to me. And I just guess that's kind of like a trait of mine. You know, people will talk to me, right?
Okay.
And because, you know, I'm not judgmental or anything, you know, I'm easygoing, kind of funny. So he would talk to me and stuff. And eventually we got to talk about, like, you know, his crime. He told me that I think he was from Iowa or somewhere, and his family, they were corn farmers. And I think this was when the big ethanol thing was coming into play.
Okay.
Right. And corn is one of the products that you use.
Right.
So I think his family was going to have some contracts, and Congressman Tom DeLay was the one who was against it. So
gotcha. He took it personal. Gotcha.
He went to Washington to get him. So I would notice Mr. Weston when he would talk to people, other people, when they'd come up to him, he'd tell them outlandish things. Like, you know, we was watching football one time, and he told this one guy he won the Heisman Trophy, and then he'd kind of smile as he says it, and they just think, oh, this guy's just nuts. But he'd just say these outlandish things, right?
Right.
And I just kind of look at him like, he don't talk that way to me.
Different combo, huh?
Yeah, it's a totally different, very intelligent man. I mean, it was just like, okay, what are you doing, Mr. Weston? Are you really crazy, or are you crazy like a fox here? You know,
right?
Because I mean, he had it made. He had a one-man handicap room. Mike, I mean, I know if you know they talk about, you know, prison cells like, you know, 10 by 8 or something.
Yeah.
Mike, these freaking rooms at the medical center were like 20 by 20.
Oh yeah, well,
huge.
My friend Rob Rosso, that was there with Carmine, also. He said Butner was just a, you know,
different place.
Yeah, like a sweet spot. Other than you do have some undesirables there. And
yes,
stuff
you do,
like
and we'll get
that. But for the most part, other than if you're not putting in prison politics and that type of stuff, it was a pretty sweet spot.
It was a sweet spot. And the FMC was even better because, you know, I mean, you know, those rooms are just huge. So he's got a one-man handicap room all by himself. You know, nobody bothers him. He doesn't have to worry about what you said, the prison politics or anything. So he's got a pretty sweet deal. And I think he's still there. I think that I
right? I'm going to look it up.
Yeah. And I think he is at the FMC.
Okay.
So I got a couple other people that I'm caring for. And then that guy that I wrote you about, Christopher Mather. This kid, he comes onto the unit. Probably about 6 foot tall, rail thin, long, bushy brown hair, young kid.
Uh-huh.
And so he comes in, you know, and I'm in the TV room alone, and he comes in and he kind of squats down. He's looking at the TV. So we start talking, and I ask him, you know, he asked me what I'm in for. I told him bank robbery. He thought it was the coolest thing he ever heard. And I asked him what he's in for, and he said he killed his stepmom.
Man, how do you let me ask you, man?
Yes.
How do you even, like, once he said that, you got to process it, and like we said, this is Butner Medical. It's a neutral zone.
Yes.
As Rob would explain it. Hell, guys we're going to talk about, Joey Testa, Carmine, who were solid, could walk in a yard without a problem, were there and had to sit a table away from undesirables.
Right.
And whatnot. Man, how do you like, just knowing what he said, just like in your head?
Because you know that you're at the hospital, for one. You got a job on a psych wing, okay? So
you know you're going to come in contact.
So obviously the kid's got problems. years. Okay. And it's a really sad place to be. That's why I couldn't be there long, because it's almost like the people who time forgot. Like, in prison, there's always a line for the phone. Nobody ever used the phone. They didn't have nobody to call, probably because they their whole families.
Wow.
But I'm just saying,
man.
they didn't have nobody. They didn't have money to go to the
I got you. Yeah.
Their whole existence was meals and pill line. That was their existence. Butner's a complex. There's like 4 prisons there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a hospital, a camp. At the time, there was the low and a medium. And they was building another medium there while I was there. So because I had medium points, the guy asked me, instead of going through the whole Oklahoma thing, he just asked me if I'd like to go next door to the medium. And I'm like, that's fine, because, I'm in North Carolina. All the weather's nice. It's not like I'm getting any visits anyway, right? Mm-hmm. So I said, yeah. So it's like I got transferred on like 2 days. That's where I met Carmine and Joey.
That's where you go. Okay.
And it's like when you get to R&D, the captain comes in and he tells you, he says, we have a sex offender program here. He said, there's a unit that's all sex offenders. And if you touch one of them, we will charge you with a hate crime and ship. I mean, they freaking protect us. I guess George W. Bush and them put a program together. And then what I heard is they did away with the program and they gave all of them P numbers to where they ain't ever getting out.
Good.
Which is fine with me.
Yeah, I'm okay with that, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm good with that.
They also tell you that there's a step down program, which that's for the mental health guys who they're not sick enough to be in a medical center, but they're not really able to walk a real yard. So they put them there. They live in this unit, and they're kind of adjusting them to like a prison setting, to where they have to go to meals, they have to go to groups and stuff like that. Okay. So they have that unit there too. So, I go through the R&D, and I go to my unit, and of course, I kind of look Italian. So guys come, like, the white guys come up to the white guy who comes in, what you here for, you tell them, and they ask you, I'm Italian. Yeah, oh yeah, we got Italians here, So this guy, Tommy, comes up to me, and he's Italian, and tells me who's all on the yard, Carmine, Persico, Joey Testa, all this stuff. I'm like, okay, good. So that night at dinner, Tommy introduces me to this old man. His name's, they called him Toothpick. Didn't even really I don't even think I knew his real name. He was just Toothpick. Old guy, always had a plastic toothpick in his mouth. He was a bookmaker. He was a bookie too. So He met me, and, I told him about my dad, how he was a bookie. And so we kind of got along good. Mm-hmm. So he goes, after dinner, come out to the yard, meet the guys. I'm like, okay. So after dinner, I go out there, and, he kind of greets me, and we walk over and introduces me to the Italians at the bocce. They got 2 like bocce things, and they got picnic tables there, and that's the Italian area, and of course some of the other white guys that come over to shoot the bowl with them, play some bocce. So Toothpick's there, and he calls over Joey. He introduces me to Joey Testa, and Joey was real nice, shook my hand and everything, Joey was he was a little different, to where he kind of wasn't as social as the rest of them, and he kind of worked out a lot. He had cancer. He was at the FMC, and his cancer went in remission. Mm-hmm. So they wanted to keep him close, so that's why he was at the medium. Okay. And he was a decent guy, I mean, he was friendly enough to me, stuff like that. So I met Joey, and then Toothpick looks at me and goes, well, are you ready to meet the boss? And I said, yeah, I guess. So there's an officer shack at Rec, right? And there's these roses, all kind of flower beds. And there's this old guy tending the flower beds. And me and Toothpick walk up to him, and Toothpick goes, Carmine, I want you to meet Jimmy. He's a friend of ours. And he turns around, it's Carmine Persico. And I'm freaking shit.
Do you know who Carmine Persico is?
I know who Carmine Persico is.
Because I mean, a lot of people wouldn't know, but yeah, okay.
Man, I'm kind of shaking, like they say, like a blind faggot at a weenie roast, man. It's like my hands are shaking, my knees are knocking, and Carmine puts his hand out and he goes, "What you in for, Jimmy?" And of course, I'm a stuttering prick right there. I go, bank robbery. And he goes, Jesus, I hope you used a note.
Oh, that's a good one, man.
So we kind of got a laugh about it, and we kind of talked a couple minutes. And then he said, okay, I'll talk to you later. So then I kind of walk away with toothpick and he goes, man, he must really like you. And I go, I go, why? He goes, he don't really joke with people like that. And I go, well, all right,
That's good. That's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
Carmine likes you.
Yeah. So that next day, I don't have a job or anything because I just got there. So I kind of go out to rec after breakfast and Carmine's there. That's his job. His job is the flower beds.
Okay.
So he sees me. He calls me over. And he goes, hey, you shop commissary? I said, oh, to be honest with you, Mr. Persico. He goes, Carmine, there's no Mr. Persico here. I said, okay. I said, honestly, I don't really have, anybody taking care of me. I really don't shop. I said, I got to get a job. He goes, well, they sell vegetables at the commissary. Onions, tomatoes, green peppers, jalapenos. They sell bread and pasta. He got the information off my shirt. It's got my name and number. He goes, I'm going to have some money sent to your books. He goes, and then you get me the vegetables and stuff because, there's a limit what you can get. And he goes, and then whatever's left over, get the stuff that you need. I said, okay, that's fine. So that night before dinner, I checked, I got $100 on my book.
Okay.
So I go out there and Carmine calls me over and he gives me a commissary list. And I'm going through it, and it's like $18. And I said, Carmine, this is only $18. You need stuff else? He goes, nah, that's it. I said, you want me to go for you again next week? He goes, no. He says, get what you need. And I said,
oh, man.
And it's like I said, are you sure? And he goes, yeah. He says, you need a radio to watch TV. You need hygiene. He says, get whatever you need. Ain't no big deal. And I'm like, well, I appreciate it. Thanks. And I kind of felt like I didn't really feel bad, but it was like, I didn't want to be a charity case.
Sure. Yeah, but then also you don't want to. There's going to be a time when I'm going to need something from you.
Yeah.
I'm going to need something from you, Jimmy.
They may never come.
Exactly.
I said, Jesus, it's only $82. Right. So then he just took to me. He liked to play pinochle, and we played pinochle. Me, him, and Toothpick. We play three-handed pinochle and stuff. And he would ask me like stuff about my childhood. And he asked me what my favorite movie was. I told him The Godfather, and he told me how the actors talked to like a lot of the mob guys there about
how to
doing the movie
act or whatever.
Yeah. And he said, James Caan used to hang out with him and all this stuff.
Right.
He was real influential in the making of the movie. So I thought that was just crazy.
That's cool, man. That's cool.
So then out of the blue, he says, how'd they end up catching you anyway? And I said, well, my wife turned me in. And he cocked his head and he goes, what? I said, yeah. I said, my wife turned me in. And he says, you got to be kidding. I said, no. I said, and then as I was on the run, she called me on the phone and put my little boy on the phone so the FBI, I could track him. And he just looks at me with this look and he goes, that bitch got to go, Jimmy. I'm serious. He goes, no woman ever calls the FBI on their husband. And then to turn the money in that could have been for your boys, he goes, you don't do that. And then to have your little boy call you while the feds track you, he goes, I don't hurt women, but that bitch got to go. And I said, listen, I said, she may not have been a good wife, but she's an incredible mother. I said, the boys come first. I said, I'm in prison for a long time. She's their mom. I said, no, we don't need to do anything. I was doing that. And he goes, I don't. Yeah. So about a week later, I'm out there and we're playing pinochle, me, him, and Toothpick. And he kind of reaches down in his bag and he puts an envelope on the table for me. And I open it up and it's pictures. It's my wife and her boyfriend. And then there's pictures of her house. And he looks at me and he goes, just in case you change your mind.
Wow, man.
I'm like, whoa.
Are you serious, man?
Yes.
That is nuts. Holy smokes. What'd you think? Did you think differently about the reach of the Mafia and, like how real it is at that point? I mean, that's
my God, stuff. It is. It is, because, I mean, you see the movies and stuff. I saw The Godfather when I was 10, I think. And I loved it. I mean, it was probably the greatest thing I ever saw. But, yeah, I mean, you just see how, I mean.
Gee, and how fast was that from the point that you.
A week.
1 week, man.
A week. He had his people there from New York to Dayton, Ohio, taking pictures, knowing where she lives. And that if I he was going to have her whacked. And it's funny. She don't know. And because, we don't talk. And she don't know
how close it was, huh?
So I did say to him then, I said, listen, no, we're not going to do anything. He goes, okay. But when that youngest turns 18, that bitch is gone. I said, okay.
Holy dang, that's nuts, man.
Yes.
That's wild, man.
So,
good God.
So he was just like that with me, and I didn't know why. And one time I was kind of walking with Toothpick, and I said, why do you think Carmine likes me? He goes, I don't know. He goes, he said, his son, Alley Boy. He said, he's older than you, but he's got things going on, and maybe he doesn't have his son, so maybe he kind of looks at you like that. And he says, I'll tell you what, he checked you out. I said, what do you mean? He goes, he had his people check you out. And he says to me, Toothpick, do you know the money that kid got? And he says, that kid's got frickin' balls. I don't know how he fits them in his pants. He goes, that kid's balls are so big. He goes, I never heard of a bank robber getting anything like that kid got. He said, if he'd have been with me, that kid would have been an earner. He said, he respects that. And it's like he respected the fact that I did it alone. And that was it. He kind of respects that.
Let me ask you about Joey Testa, man.
Yes.
All right. So Joey, I told you Rob had a little issue with him. Yes. He always has said that Joey was the mayor of the prison or whatever, wherever he was. He was real like close with the guards and
he was
smart. Like I'm not saying like he was doing anything wrong because I don't know. I wasn't there, but he would say he would get extra food.
Oh yeah.
He would get, did you experience the same Carmine, thing? Tell me about Joey Testa. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, Joey and Carmine would always sit at this one table, and the guards would bring them like plates. This was back when the feds was actually feeding you on plates.
Mm-hmm.
And they would put like plates of pork and all this stuff just heaping on their table. And
really?
and Carmine had always told me, well, Jimmy, come and get some of this. We can't eat this. But Joey, of course, I was not as close to Joey as I was with Carmine. Joey just wasn't really a person you got close to.
Okay.
And I remember, the DeMeo crew, they had a book. It was called The Murder Machine.
Yes.
And it's about the DeMeo crew, Joey and Anthony. And those books hit the compound.
Okay.
So they got a lot of those books on the compound, and Joey was really he didn't like those books, so he had people go around and buy the books that were out there and get rid of them.
Really?
Yeah, he just didn't like those books being on the compound.
Gotcha.
But I will tell you what Joey was. When I met Joey, and he had this real big toothy smile, right? Okay. But his eyes, I'll never forget them. Mike, they were just black. They were it was like a shark. There was no sparkle. There was nothing there. It was just, I mean, it was. I can't
dead-eyed killer stare, huh?
Yeah, and I've only seen that one other time, and that was with that guy Larry Hall that I lived with.
Okay.
And it's just like you see in that there's just nothing there. It's just void of everything, lifeless.
Right.
And it's kind of scary to see somebody like that smiling at you, but the eyes aren't smiling.
You could, right? Yeah. It's a different. I know what you mean. Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Joey was nice. I mean, we'll kind of get into my laundry thing a little bit, how I did all their clothes, how they named me Jimmy the Crease. But like I was doing that, and they was paying me like outstanding. You know, they took care of me better than any other laundry guy ever in the BOP. But I remember Joey had a surprise visit, so he sent a uniform up for me to iron for him. So I ironed it for him and took it down to his unit, gave it to him. That next day, somebody comes in with a great big bag of Taster's Choice coffee. He says, "That's from Joey." So I said, "Why is he giving me this? He pays me." So I saw him at dinner. I said, "Joey, you don't got to send me that. You pay me every month." He goes, "You're always there for me, Crease." And I said, "Well, I can thank you." You know, so he was like that. But
yeah,
like I said, you know, he, like you said about the guards, seemed like he talked to them a little more than he did the inmates.
Okay.
Yeah. He was with Carmine a lot. Like, you know, they lived on the same unit and they would go to meals together and stuff. But then, like, you know, with Carmine, with his garden, Joey was more working out at the weight pit and playing handball. So they was on different time. You know, and it was crazy because Joey for having cancer, I mean, he was, for like a thin guy, he was kind of yoked. I mean, he was in great shape. Joey was in great shape. And
wow. And so he stayed active and everything, and I guess diet probably.
Yeah.
And genetics.
I guess he got sick again, and I know he transferred out to California to be close to his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew he was out at Terminal Island. And then I just saw how we talked about how they got released.
Unbelievable, man. Unbelievable, man. That's
yes.
Listen, if there was, if anybody was going to say people were going to get out of prison or whatever, man, the last people I would think that were going to get out of prison would be these guys. I'm being serious. I mean, Mike, I don't wish prison on anybody, but I mean, geez.
Mike, these guys were hanging guys in the bathtub, draining the blood out of them, and then chopping them up.
Eating pizza.
Yeah, eating pizza and freaking sausages and shit.
Yeah, man. That's that. I'm telling you, it's
their whole thing was no body, no crime. Yeah,
unbelievable.
I mean, those, man, and you know, I mean, I can't say I know for a fact, but you know, they at least got 100 under. Easy.
Oh man.
Yeah.
The DeMeo crew was who knows, man? I mean,
but you know what? And it's funny because I don't want to sound hypocritical about things, about like how other people, like, you know, murder people and stuff. And I don't want to say because of Carmine, because, like, you know, I loved him so much and he was so good to me. But there's a difference in a guy who goes and murders people as opposed to that lifestyle. Because those people know what they're into. Right. It's not like they were killing innocent people.
No, if they're whacking guys that are in that same business and that's what you signed up for, you know that is a good chance.
Yeah, and it's like they act like they was like a baker or a banker. That was their job.
No.
And so, you know, like I said, I don't want to be hypocritical, but, you know.
That's a fact, though. No, I got you.
You accept it more from them.
Right. And like you said, if it wasn't just, you know, civilians on the street getting taken out or somebody, you know, like that, then you don't have the same thought on it. At least I don't, man. I look at it different because that was the business, man.
Yes.
That was that business. If you were in that life, in that business, you knew what you signed up for. And so, unfortunately, that was the name of the game.
Let me tell you about the Jimmy the Crease name. Everybody asked me, where'd you get the name Jimmy the Crease? So they asked me if I wanted to do their laundry. There was Carmine and Joey and Toothpick and this other Italian guy. And they said, you want to wash our clothes, we'll pay you. That's a little hustle, in prison. So I said, sure. So they said, we just want you to do our khakis, wash our uniforms, iron them. We like the creases down the middle, the crease collar, and the crease of the pants. I said, okay. So Carmine gives me his uniform, and then Toothpick says, you do good, you do all of us. And I'm like, okay. So I take it back to the unit. I spent like an hour on Carmine's uniform, man. I mean, I got them suckers tight.
Sharp.
So I walk it over to him, and he comes out and gets it. And he looks at it, and he goes, Jesus, I never saw creases like this before in my life. He goes, you're Jimmy the Crease. That's your name, Jimmy the freaking Crease. And he goes, and if you got the in your nickname, you're something special, kid.
Nice.
It followed me all through prison. I actually
got it tatted
on me. No. That's my only tattoo is Jimmy the Crease.
Jimmy the Crease. Man, you can't beat that, man. Hell, shit, are you kidding, man? The Crease, man. That's
and they
great.
each paid me $50 a month just to do their uniforms.
Is that right?
Yeah,
wow. That's good hustle there, man.
But I knew what it was. That was Carmine's way of taking care of me, because he'd always ask me, "Do you need anything?" "No, I'm good. No, I'm good." And I would never go to him. But you kind of take care of your own, and that was his way of taking care of me and still kind of letting me keep my pride.
Yeah. That's neat, man. Yeah,
yes.
Man. That's you know what? I from like inside dudes like that. But I tell you, Rob said, man, Carmine was still a tough old guy, man.
He was.
He would still, but he was like, he'll still punch you in the face or whatever, and throw down. He said he wasn't,
he was strong as a bull, buddy.
Yeah,
he was.
Yeah. That's exactly what he said. And tough, and then the garden thing.
He took pride. He took pride in that garden, man. He really did.
Different story. And I've seen one picture of Carmine near his rose bushes or something. He's got shorts on, no shirt, standing outside. I thought that was a neat, really neat picture of him like that. Wow. Yeah. So how long do you stay there? Do you go to anywhere else?
I was there. I told you, I got a job there as a inmate companion up in that step down unit. Okay. So I asked Carmine about it. I said, they want me to do this job, but I would have to live up there. He goes, man, that'd be sweet. That unit's quiet. He goes, you got the laundry room all to yourself. He goes, and they're not bad up there, So I said, okay, I'll try it. So I moved up there, and it was all right, But like I told you, I can't really get into it, and hopefully I will be. But that's where I met that guy, Larry Hall, the serial killer. He's the one with the black hair. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He is the premise of the Apple TV show Blackbird.
Okay.
They think Larry Hall could be probably one of the most prolific serial killers of our time.
Wow.
He was into the Revolutionary War and stuff and Civil War reenactments, so he traveled. And they think he might have over 40 women.
Oh, my God.
When they arrested him, he actually confessed to like maybe 25 murders. But then he recanted. So he got sentenced to life in prison without parole.
Mm-hmm.
And he was at the Federal Medical Center in Springfield, Missouri. And he had an appeal coming up. And the feds were afraid he might have a possibility to win his appeal. Mm-hmm. So there was a drug dealer. His name was
Keene?
Jimmy Keene.
Yes, okay.
And the feds gave he got sentenced to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the feds offered him a deal that if he could go into that prison, get close to Larry, and get him to tell him maybe where the body was and admit to things, they would get him out. So he went into Springfield to the hospital. You know, he I guess he got kind of close to act like he was Larry's friend in that. And then supposedly he saw Larry in the wood shop with this map of like Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin, and there was all these red dots. And Larry used to carve these falcons out of wood, and he would put them on the map. And Jimmy asked him what they were. He said they're to look over the dead. So this guy thinks, okay, he's got stuff on Larry. So he calls his handler the next day, and he can't get through to him. But instead of being smart, he goes into Larry and just goes off on him.
Loses it. That's what I read.
You're sick. You know, you're sick. You're just you should burn in hell. So he gets sent to the SHU for 2 weeks, and the FBI don't know he's trying to get in touch with him.
Right.
So they finally get in touch with him, and then supposedly by the time they got there, they couldn't find any map or nothing. So
everything was
just had this guy's word of what Larry told. They still couldn't find any body, and they did let the guy out of prison.
That's what I read, man. That was nuts,
they did. Man. So they made this Apple Plus TV series. It's called Blackbird. It's about his time with Larry Hall.
Okay.
And what was crazy is that this guy sought out Larry for like maybe a short amount of time. Larry sought me out. I lived in the same unit with him for 3 years, and he was my cellmate for a year.
Dang.
And after a few months, he knew I was with Carmine and Joey. He knew I was a bank robber. They ain't letting me out. So and I don't know anything about it. So I don't have an agenda, right?
Yeah.
I'm not talking to him with an agenda, you know? So after about a few months, he starts talking to me. And the things he told me, he is, and you know, you gotta have like a bullshit detector, right? So, because you know, every drug dealer you meet in prison, all of them work for Pablo Escobar. You know, they all try to embellish what they did.
Sure.
And you can always catch them up. You know, there was no, I mean, to know the detail he went in about some of these things, you can't make this stuff up. And then I would try to go back like weeks later, and I couldn't catch him up. He wouldn't change. But and especially when I had the Murder Machine book about Joey. And I will tell you one thing he said to me is that I said, man, you know, Joey and them, how they did that with the bodies, and he looks at me just heavily medicated. But he's like, it's not hard to cut somebody up. And it's like, this guy is probably the most prolific serial killer of all time. And I didn't know this. This is 2006, 2007 in the BOP. They didn't have core links back then, emails, you know. You can't run people like you do now, you know. So I don't know anything about this guy. I don't know about his crimes. You know, I know he's in for murder. I know he's doing life, but I don't know this. And then when I get out and I see the stuff, I'm like, son of a, and I'm like,
wow.
I'm like, the things this guy has told me for a year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's different for this guy, Jimmy Keene, to go in there for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
But I lived with this guy for a year in the same cell. And he talked to me. I didn't go in pumping him for stuff.
Did you ever did you ever have any worry being with this guy?
Absolutely,
you know, any time where you were ever creeped out like, oh shit, you know, this guy.
No.
I'm gonna have to
I
sleep
just
with
smashed
one
him.
eye
He was
open.
a short little fat guy.
Okay, I got you.
He's got the power over women, but he's
I got you. Okay.
afraid of his own shadow.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
There you go. That about sums it up.
Yeah. But
jeez, man.
You know, and you kind of get a little disgusted about it. But I'm like, you know, and I don't know why I was always hard on myself for my crimes, but I always lived with a lot of guilt. Not really for my crimes, but because I left tiny little boys. You know, I left a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 4-month-old. You know, so I carried a lot of guilt. So I'm like, who am I to judge anybody, right? And look who I'm friends with, right?
I got you.
Carmine and Joey. But then eventually it got to the point to where, you know, I just can't live with that guy. So I told him, I said, Larry, I finally had to say, Larry, I gotta move, buddy. And he's like, you know, I don't want you to move. And then I go, well, I got to get a bottom bunk because my knee, you got a bottom bunk pass. I said, so because I wasn't going to be like that Keen was to him and say, oh, you're a sicko. Because, you know, I'm in prison, right? I got a lot of time but I'm not going to live with that anymore. And I still, to this day, I have nightmares about some of our talks.
Damn.
And
did they ever?
Really hope
has anybody ever talked to you about that? I mean, as far as like people who are investigating that type of thing, you know,
who,
like investigators or people, do
Nobody's
they ever reach out to people who are around these people, like trying to, hey, did this guy say anything about this or that? You know what I mean,
Mike? I didn't
not in a
know,
rat fashion, but we're talking about.
I didn't even know he was. I didn't know anything about him. I didn't even know they didn't know. Man. So I don't. It's like he's just telling me these things, right? Going into detail about things. I don't know that the feds would know. And because of the people I was with and because of the time I had, Mike, I don't think I could have told the feds anyway.
No, I don't think so. That's why I say it's yeah. I mean,
you know, even though it's
you
horrible,
can't go talk to, exactly.
And I'm sure there might be some of your people out there that think I'm an asshole for saying that, but you just got to know when you're living in there. You know,
that's what a lot of people want to hear is the reality of it.
There's like two type of people you can't be in prison. You can't be a pedophile and you can't be a rat. They will kill you.
Right.
Your own people will kill you. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that's what it is. So gotcha. I don't even think I could do that.
No, I don't. No, you would have been on that list. I mean, that's just. I'm just wondering, do they ever, you know?
Nobody's ever questioned
any type of investigative type people think to themselves, okay, this guy's in there. Maybe he's in there. We could, like they did with the other guy, with the Keen guy. Well, they got the info. They sent him in.
They sent him in there,
right,
on a purpose. And you got to understand, Larry's been in prison since '96. He's probably had 1,000 cells.
Right.
You know? Mm-hmm. But Larry's the type who I don't want to say that he idolized me, but he kind of did.
Okay.
And especially because, you know, there wasn't many people who watched TV on the unit, so I controlled the TV, and I'd always ask people what they wanted to watch. He never watched TV till I started controlling, you know, and then he'd come and sit his chair there. He didn't talk to a lot of people. He said hello to everybody on the compound. If you met him, you would think that he's the nicest guy in the world, because it's always, hello, Mr. Persico, hello, Mr. Testa. And they're like, hey, Larry. So all these guys are saying,
so that's,
hey,
so
Larry,
that's what
Larry. They don't know anything about him because they don't give a crap about Larry.
They're just living their existence. They don't.
Who is he? He's a guy in a step down unit. They don't know what he is.
Right. Gotcha.
So
okay. Great point. There you go.
And then I didn't know what he was till I got out of prison this last time.
Wow.
And I'm sitting with my sister. We're watching like a 2020 special because, you know, on I noticed everything's true crime. Mm-hmm. There's like 50 true crime channels.
It's literally true crime.
And there's a story, and they show his face, and I go, Tony, I live with that guy.
Jeez.
And then they're telling the story, and I tell my sister, I said, he told me these things.
Oh, man.
And wow. I would like, if you allow me, I would like to put a little plug in. I got on, how all this started for me is I got on that LinkedIn site, right?
Okay.
Because I saw people in there were prison consultants. I always heard about that. And I'm thinking, well, geez, if anybody knows it's me, you know, over 20 plus years in the system, right? Mm-hmm. So I put on there, and I didn't pull no punches. I put what I was, you know, befriended by a mafia boss, lived like a serial killer. So there's this psychiatrist lady. Her name is Dr. Leslie Dobson. And she sent me a message on there, and she says, I'm starting a iHeartRadio podcast. It's called Intentionally Disturbing, and I think you would be an awesome guest. And I said, oh, that's great. So we started like emailing, and then she called me one Friday evening. We talked for about an hour, and she's like, you know, you've got a massive story to tell. And she goes, I got a lot of producer friends out here in California. She goes, Dick Wolf, the guy who does all of the Law and Order shows, is like a really good friend of hers. So she says, would you mind if I give your phone number to these people? I said, well, no, give it, you know? So she tells me to put together a resume and she says, not a work resume, just things you can talk about you've been through, right? And she said, and then I want you to start making videos so that, because she says, when you come on my podcast, because she's got like, I think like, 400,000 followers and stuff.
Wow.
She says, when that's a really nice lady. She was a psychiatrist in some of the worst jails and prisons in the country.
Really?
Yeah. And just a really super nice lady and really smart. And so we was talking and then just last week, because I'm talking about these videos and I was talking about how can I make a video about Larry? How can you put a year's worth of stuff into one video? And she goes, I don't want you to really say anything like that because I don't want you to give that story away for free. She goes, Dick Wolf's son, Jason, wants to do something with you.
Great.
So I might
that's awesome.
So I might have a big opportunity thanks to her.
That's wonderful. Man.
And I mean, she's the one who got me doing all these videos. And if that's not it, I wouldn't be here talking to you.
Isn't that cool? Well, thank you. Yeah, that's so cool.
Anybody who I've ever met says you need to write a book. He says they say your story is a movie. Your story is a book. And especially because they say you're a likable bad guy. It's not like I haven't ever touched a drug in my life. Hardly drank. I didn't gamble because my dad was a bookie, and so it's like I didn't rob the banks for those things. So it's like she said you've got a massive story to tell. Just and it's like we haven't really got into because Mike, I've been to prison 2 other times. I got out after 13 years in the feds, and we'll go back to the people I was with, but I did 13 years in the feds.
Okay.
I got out in 2015.
Uh-huh.
And I was really naive in the fact that I thought my work history would balance out my crime. And it didn't. And I couldn't find a job. Nobody would hire me. I mean, I was the manager and the area supervisor at like pizza places. I couldn't even get a job delivering pizzas. Okay?
Really?
Nobody would hire me. And I got depressed and I took a gun. So I was dating a girl. I took a gun and I went to the first bank I robbed. And I thought this is where my life ended back in 2002, this first bank. And I really thought of myself in the parking lot. But for some reason, I wanted to see the inside of the bank. I walked in it, got a couple pamphlets, and I walked out. And a woman in there recognized me from 13 years prior and called the police. And they came and got my car. And I got out and was talking to them. They said, you got anything in your car? I said, yeah, I got a gun on the passenger seat. So I got arrested for a weapon under disability. And I did 18 months in the state of Ohio. And
holy smokes, man.